The road vanished the way breath fades on glass, one soft blur and then nothing beyond it. Mark eased the SUV toward the turnout beside the lodge. The road closed sign flapping on its chain like a sentence trying to finish itself in bad weather. When he cut the engine, the wind kept speaking for all of us, pushing through seams, testing what the day was made of. Inside was a different grammar. The door shut and the lodge gathered us into its low, resonant vowel, a held note that steadied the chest. Pine beams crossed overhead. A stone hearth housed a patient fire. The air carried chocolate and dry wool. Steam rose from a saucepan and wrote temporary cursive in the light. Lena locked the door with a click that sounded like a fact. She moved with the economy of someone who trusts decisions more than hopes. "You're not going anywhere tonight," she said, not unkindly, as if she were pointing out where the wall stood. "Storm will sit on the pass till morning. Maybe longer." Ruth appeared from the back hall in a cable-knit sweater the color of smoke. Boots planted, grin hung at an angle that made even her silence read as commentary. Her eyes lifted, measured, lingered. "So tall," she decided, amused rather than impressed. "But you look gentle. That's the dangerous part." The line wore the outfit of a joke, but underneath it was a thesis trying on its shoes. Sienna came next, soft-footed in an oatmeal cardigan, the kind of presence that reduces a room's volume without subtracting anyone from it. She noticed our wet footprints drying on the oak, the way the fire fell and then corrected itself, the spoon in the saucepan chiming once against the rim. Her gaze found mine like a hand settles on a shoulder, present. Not heavy. The smile hadn't arrived yet, but the idea of it had. "You listen before you speak," she said. Good. Language had been turned into weather. Weather was busy. I unwound my scarf, put my jacket on a chair back, let my lungs learn smoke and sugar. Mark had already lost his attention into a group chat about a neighbor down the hill. He mouthed something to his mother about checking in with Pete and vanished toward the mudroom, his boots offering a quick percussion that the wind erased without apology. The saucepan made a small, bright music as Lena stirred. The smell sharpened. "Sugar?" she asked, not looking up. "Yes," Ruth said. "I need to remember I'm human." Sienna took her station at the window, palm held just shy of the glass. Snow feathered and stuck, undrawing the yard. "You can't tell where the ground ends anymore," she said. "It's like the house is a raft." We began to orbit the fire the way planets do before they admit to it. The generator's low purr came through the north wall like a satisfied animal. The storm pressed its face to the siding and hummed. Ruth found a deck of cards because fingers want tasks when the mind is listening. Sienna led me to the linen closet for blankets. And the door, being a door in an old lodge, closed most of the way of its own accord, adjusting distance without asking. The shelves smelled of cedar and washed wool. The smell made my shoulders lower in a way I hadn't agreed to but didn't mind. I reached for the top shelf. Our hands did not meet. The care not to touch did more work than any touch would have. "Careful," Sienna observed. Pleased rather than put off. Not timid. Exact. I try not to break what isn't mine. Back in the main room, Ruth shuffled one-handed, a show with no audience. And Lena, clipboard on the counter, pencil behind her ear, wore the quiet authority of a person who keeps the future from tripping by writing it down. "Generator first," she said. "If it goes, we keep the pump, the fridge, a few lights. Fireplace will carry the rest." She skimmed me with a glance that measured, not tested. "You any good with small engines? Good enough to be dangerous." Ruth's grin widened, enjoying the echo. "See, outside." The storm gave us its face and we respected it by not pretending it wasn't a face. The generator sat in its weathered wooden shelter under the eaves, purring with the stubborn health of machinery that's been maintained without romance. Lena opened the lid like you open a book you know by heart. We listened first because listening is the work. The engine gave us its even breath. Fuel, oil, plugs, she saw to each, and when wind shoved us the width of a shoulder, our shoulders met and then did not. The flashlight warmed in my palm. The latch shut with a certainty that returned something to the world that the storm had borrowed. "You'll sleep by the fire," Lena said as we pushed through the mudroom into heat. Hospitality phrased as decision. "Warmest spot. If we lose power, you'll notice first." Understood. Dinner was soup. And soup behaved. Carrots and thyme and the kind of heat you feel in your hands before your mouth. Bread whose crust resisted in a way that reminded you of the right kind of stubbornness. Conversation found its temperature without performance. Ruth kept inching the knob toward higher. Sienna declined to help. Which had its own heat. "So?" Ruth asked, refilling my bowl with a hand that engineered her wrist against mine as if the ladle required it. "You and Mark? Since college? Since a printer died in public and we fixed it with a fork." I said. "You're better at not answering than most," she said, which was both a compliment and an invitation to try harder. "I told you. The danger is in the silence." "The danger," Sienna said, "is believing every silence means the same thing." Lena conducted without baton. When words leaned too hot, she moved a log inside the firebox. When they threatened to cool into politeness, she let a silence rest long enough to become real. The house widened inside Mark's absence. His phone buzzed. He read. Stood. Pointed his body toward the road. "The Jefferson's generator is coughing," he said. "They've got the baby home. I'm going to run down and help prime it." "Road's ugly," Lena said, fork hovering for the kind of second you notice only if you're noticing her already. "I'll take the sled to the bend." He kissed his mother's cheek and grinned at the room as if the room were its own weather pattern. "Don't wait up." The door accepted him into the white with a sound that meant finished. The draft rearranged the air. The way departures do. Silence redrew its borders. The soup found a quieter simmer. Ruth rolled her shoulders and let her posture claim the hearth. Sienna draped the heavy blanket across the window seat and watched the storm with the seriousness of a person reading a book that has yet to decide its ending. I chose the end of the sofa where heat traveled to bone without scalding skin. Lena stood a breath longer than anyone else, cataloging the room's math, then sat opposite me, knees angled in a geometry that left roots open. Sienna began, because someone had to and because she was the sort who could make beginning feel like continuing. "How do you make decisions?" she asked me, "when the thing you want isn't the thing you planned for?" "Slowly," I said. The word felt like owning the right tool. "I look for where the risk actually is, not where the noise says it is. I listen to who else the decision touches. I try to distinguish appetite from need." "And respect?" she asked, moving the question to the next rung. "What does it look like when you're wrong?" "Stopping when someone says stop," I said. "Apologizing without turning apology into a demand. Telling the truth without swinging it at anyone." Ruth tilted her head. "Pleased, and confidence when you're right." "Quiet," I said, like a door held open without insisting anyone walk through. The fire registered the exchange with a pop, as if staging applause. Lena set her cup down and entered the conversation with the full weight of her voice for the first time that night. "This house is safe," she said evenly, "but safe doesn't mean we switch curiosity off." She laced her fingers together, not to contain anything, but to show that containment and offering can share a hand. Her gaze found mine like a level finds true. The moment drew a kind of architecture around us, 4 adults. One storm, a field of attention no longer pretending to be something else. I set my cup aside so the words could stand on their own feet. "Before anything else," I said, "boundaries are here, not to dim wanting, to protect it. Boundaries are to keep us safe, not to forbid affection." The room exhaled like someone had opened a window that didn't let in cold. "I need words," I added, the ask simple because it had to be. "Only if each of you wants this. Only if each of you is comfortable. Any of us can stop. Whenever, for any reason, and the others will treat that as a fact. No proof, no penalty." Lena leaned forward 1 controlled inch. The downbeat of a conductor starting a movement everyone already knew the melody to. "If anyone is still hesitant," she said, consonants clean without turning sharp, "say it now. If not, then let's stop pretending." Ruth went first, because velocity is a gift when you choose its direction. "I want to she said, checking her sentence for wobble and finding none. And I'm comfortable. Her voice was lower than her laugh, anchored in something that didn't need to win anything to count. Sienna did not borrow courage nor sell it. I agree, she said, with respect and discretion, a signature written in air and sealed with the steadiness of her gaze. Lena held the silence after like a cellist holds the last note before the bow lifts. Then she turned her hands palm up on her knees, anchor. Offering, and said, "Then we know where we stand." She didn't reach for me. Leadership can look like letting the first gesture belong to the person you're trusting. I looked at each of them so no one had to wonder where attention was. Ruth bright with humor braided to hunger. Sienna luminous with exactness. Lena steady and alert. The rare discipline of desire that knows the difference between control and care. "Thank you," I said, because gratitude is the liturgy of arrangements that demand kindness. We spoke less, now that we had said what words were for. Ruth tugged the wool blanket from the sofa and spread half across the rug like a map made of softness. Sienna tucked a corner to make structure out of comfort. Lena opened the firebox, fed the flames a new log. And competence made her face look even more like itself. The room's temperature changed without the thermostat cooperating. It was a matter of attention. Not degrees. Ruth's hand hovered near my shoulder. Not touching. A proximity that asked without taking. Sienna set her fingers on the folded edge of the blanket by my knee. A point that allowed touch to be touch without being a signal flare. Lena crossed the short distance between not assumption and not awkward and stopped where the question lived unspeaking. I nodded. Repeating the words would have been redundant. We already knew what they said. "Good," Lena said softly, not as judgment but as calibration. The lodge trusted us with itself. We trusted it back. The next seconds became the kind of simple that resists good description. Warmth redistributed itself. Space redrew its borders in inches, not yards. Ruth's laugh dissolved into a contented hum because satisfaction has its own acoustics. Sienna's eyes closed once, not as retreat but as blessing. The ember's small collapse sounded like punctuation and not a command. If anyone had needed to stop, we would have. I said as much into the hush and received 4 kinds of assent that made a chord. Night set its hand over the window. The generator sank into a lower key. The wind decided it had made its point and stood down from the siding. The room narrowed to what the room had chosen to be. Morning built itself out of proofs. The baseboards offered a faint click. The wood yawned and settled. Glad to be wood and not narrative. The snow traded its night blue for a less severe brightness. Somewhere, butter met cast iron with a sigh that could have been forgiveness. And coffee climbed the room in spirals like a secular incense that insists on presence without explaining it. I woke to a spatula tapping once against a bowl. The blanket knew my shape and let me go. A sweater had been placed over the sofa back where my hand could find it without searching. An extra mug waited on a saucer, inverted to keep its warmth like a small, polite secret. These were not romantic gestures. They were a language fluent in care. Lena worked the skillet with the unshowy competence of a person who believes breakfast is policy. Ruth lived where heat collects, hip on the counter, hands around a mug, eyes alert in a way that did not need a spotlight. Sienna arranged the table with unpretentious precision, forks on folded napkins as if she were laying arguments in an order designed to keep conversation kind. There was no choreography to erase and none to glorify. The undertow that often follows a significant night never learned our address. What we had instead was tempered quiet. Less aftermath than arrival. Ruth slid a plate toward me without commentary. Sienna poured coffee and said my name just loud enough to mark the handoff. Lena flipped a pancake and nudged the flame down by feel. Good timing, Lena said, which is how adults mark the moment without making it heavy. She placed a second pancake on my plate, its edges letting the air know why browning counts. The first bite gathered the room into a single argument for going on being alive: browned butter. Batter that had rested long enough to remember its own structure. Syrup obedient rather than theatrical. Ruth watched me recognize this and allowed the corner of her mouth to recognize me recognizing it. Sienna sat and tucked one leg under the other like a note being folded and saved. The quiet we shared was not a gap but a surface that bore weight. When we were halfway through plates and coffee halfway down, Lena leaned a shoulder against the cabinet and let the inhale before her sentence carry some of its meaning. "Last night wasn't a mistake," she said. "No drum roll, no sermon, fact set where it belonged. It was an adult decision." Her eyes went to each of us. "Even as light. Ruth did not sharpen or sweeten it. Then the storm will lift," she said, tone deliberately lighter than her usual edge. "Call it, we found fire." The metaphor didn't need to be perfect. It only needed to be honest. And it was. Sienna's hand rested near mine. Not asking, not withholding, giving the room a stable point. "Keep this gentle," she said, like the snow outside the window. No admonition, just calibration. I nodded because gentleness is a practice and because we had agreed to practice it. The nod became the start of a list we built together without paper. Lena poured more coffee and placed the pot with a deliberate weight, giving the next part its paragraph. "Here's what makes sense," she said. "We keep this between us. We don't make promises we'd have to mortgage. We only put something on the calendar when all four of us want it and can carry it. Anyone can call stop at any point. For any reason. That isn't a problem to solve. It's a boundary to honor." Ruth lifted her mug like a toast and then improved it. "To not being idiots," she said, and then, because she respects skills more than slogans, to saying the thing before it turns into weather. Heat rose back into her shoulders. The angle of her body relaxed into presence rather than display. Sienna added the clause the list needed to be itself. "If any of this threatens anyone's friendship with anyone," she said, "we talk before we guess." Guess landed with a weight her past had given it elsewhere. Ruth's small nod came back. Agreement rather than capitulation. "For my part," I said, "if I'm not sure, I'll say I'm not sure. If I need to stop, I'll say stop. If I want more, I'll ask for more and accept no as easily as yes." Saying it out loud fitted the promise to muscle rather than to mouth. We drank, not ceremonially, but practically, to give the sentences a place to live in the body. Lena tugged the curtain open 2 inches to let white in without letting cold take a seat. Beyond the glass the world had been rewritten in thicker lines, black pines. Bright sky, the invisible past drawing itself back together where plows leaned into the work. "They'll open the road by early afternoon if they don't lose a truck," she said, accurate even in prediction. "That means we go back to other rooms, the ones we live in when storms aren't deciding for us. How we treat each other there is the test that matters." We cleaned as if the future would be watching and we wanted to like what it saw. Sienna carried plates to the sink. The sink accepted and returned them without theatrics. Ruth dried, efficient as if being efficient were an apology she didn't owe but preferred to deliver anyway. I took the pan where water and heat could talk without arguing. The kettle ticked. The clock took the opportunity to exist. My sweater waited where someone had foreseen my reach. A jar of jam arrived on the table with the casual authority of a person who plans for sweet outcomes without making them perform. We divided small logistics the way we had divided large ones, without drama and with respect. Who would check the Jeffersons in an hour? Whether the trash cans needed to hide behind the shed if the wind veered. If the sled should come inside so the seat didn't freeze again. None of it avoided what had happened. All of it carried it without dropping anything. The body carries sleep into the first minutes after waking. This felt like that. In the pause that measures whether a moment has ended or is being saved for later use. Ruth's palm pressed my shoulder, signature rather than claim. Sienna met my eyes and held them long enough to certify what we promised. Gentleness can be a power you practice. Lena touched a cabinet door. Then the back of a chair. Then nothing at all. Intention choosing its next shape without narration. "I'll text Mark," she said, returning us to the citizenship of the day. "Tell him to grab eggs if he passes the store." She looked at me a heartbeat longer than the errand required. Not to revisit the night. Only to make sure morning had the measurement right. It did. Boots identified their owners. Coats climbed shoulders. The house returned to being house, witness and shelter. Memory on a need-to-know basis. Someone added a small log to the fire and it made a satisfied hush. Agreement written in heat. From the window the world stated its plan. Snow still lay deep, but the sky had decided not to argue about it. Light occupied the landscape like a right rather than a request. Far up the pass a plow leaned into its work and black honest lines returned to the white. Inside, the lodge kept our remainder, breakfast done right. Butter soft in the air. The even pulse of a fire that had learned how to last. Before we put hands on doorknobs and let the day take attendance again. I pressed the truth into words one more time because I wanted it to hear itself. Boundaries are to keep us safe, I said, glancing from Lena to Ruth to Sienna and feeling my gratitude settle into bone. Not to forbid affection. Lena nodded, a small, satisfied motion that read like a seal. Exactly, she said, that's the whole of it. Ruth's smile this time was quieter. The kind people wear when they've chosen not to make a spectacle of something important. Text me when the plow passes your turn off, she said, which was her way of asking for exactly what she wanted without turning it into an audition. Sienna adjusted the scarf around her neck with a steady, unhurried motion and spoke like a person setting a compass rather than a rule. When we speak next, she said, let's keep the weather as gentle as we can make it. We stepped into the vestibule and the cold met our faces with honest hands. The road would reappear and with it the rest of the lives we were obligated to. But the lives inside this room, lives that had just proven themselves capable of dignity, would travel with us too. Not as a secret that trembled under the weight of hiding, not as a badge that demanded to be seen, but as a practice we were willing to keep. The door clicked, a sound you could trust. The wind greeted the day without the previous night's argument. Somewhere up the pass another plow answered its own call. The house behind us breathed. It would wait. It would keep what we had given it and not more. It would remember the grammar of what we had said, that safety can make room for curiosity. That curiosity can be kind. That affection can be a decision you can read back later without wincing. The rest belonged to weather and to people who had learned, for a night and a morning at least, how to be larger than it.